42 million.
The art world, where paintings change hands for fortunes.
Sold, thank you very much.
But for every known masterpiece, there may be another still waiting to be discovered.
But my God, there's a lot at stake with this one.
International art dealer Mould and I have teamed up to hunt for lost works by great artists. We use old-fashioned detective work and state-of-the-art science to get to the truth.
Science can enable us to see beyond the human eye. I don't believe it.
Every case is packed with surprise and intrigue.
It's like a challenge. Who am I?
But not every painting is quite what it seems.
Just the sort of thing you might associate with a faked painting.
It's a journey that can end in joy.
It is indeed by John Constable.
Oh, brilliant.
Wonderful.
Or bitter disappointment.
The work is not by Henry Mould. So sorry.
In this episode, could this delicate sketch be a work by one of the biggest names in modern art, famed for his otherworldly portraits, Amedeo Modigliani?
That's that face that you would recognise in an artistic crowd. This is quintessential Modigliani.
We journey across France to investigate this family treasure, which has questions hanging over it.
Unfortunately, they were unwilling to authenticate the drawing.
Ouch. But we're dealing with one of the art world's most forged artists.
It is so out of place and uncharacteristic.
Can forensic analysis bring this work back into the light?
We have a match.
Perfect.
Or is it a fake by one of the world's most audacious forgers?
I don't want to put you on the spot here, Mark, but that is a crime.
This week's case brings us to London. We're heading south of the river. We've been contacted by the owner of a mysterious work of art which has been with one family for generations. Henrietta Sitwell is a publicist who works with galleries and museums across Britain. She's asked for our help because she hopes she might have a museum piece of her own.
Hi, Fiona. Hi, Philip. Come in.
Hello.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
So here it is.
So what are we looking at here? A faintly but very beautifully drawn sketch of a woman seated, a child on her lap, and then in the top left, a signature, Modigliani.
And certainly looking at the face in those almond-shaped eyes, I mean, that is exactly what you'd expect, isn't it, as a Modigliani?
Amedeo Modigliani is one of the most influential and notorious artists of the 20th century. He was born in Italy in 1884 and moved to Paris in 1906, where he met avant-garde painters like Picasso. Modigliani was a wild character who led a troubled life fueled by drinking, drug-taking and womanizing. His portraits brought a bohemian underworld to life, capturing artists, writers, prostitutes, and other denizens of the Paris cafes. Modigliani's distinctive style is characterized by elongated figures and mask-like faces inspired by African art. He never enjoyed commercial success during his lifetime. Plagued by poverty, poor health, and excess, he died penniless, aged just 35.
Lot 8, painted in Paris.
Since his death, he's become a legend. And today, Modigliani is one of the most valuable artists in the world.
At $152 million. Sold here.
Could the artist who created some of the most expensive works ever sold have also made this delicate sketch?
How do you come by this?
I inherited the drawing from my father, who had inherited it from his father, Henrietta Sitwell, the writer, poet and collector.
And do you remember this in your family home?
Absolutely. I remember it hanging in the library at our family home, away from the light, just in a corner.
So has it always been considered an authentic work by Modigliani?
Absolutely. In our family, we've never been under any doubt.
Then what's the problem now?
Well, as the owner of this delightful drawing, I felt that it was my obligation to make sure that the insurance valuations were up to date. So I approached a couple of major auction houses to see if they could help.
Henrietta hoped the auction houses would value the sketch. To her dismay, they refused.
They were unwilling to authenticate the drawing, and one of them even said that they would offer it up merely as a decorative item.
Ouch. Because that just means it could be by anybody, but kind of looks nice, so they'll sell it for whatever. Not very much, I suspect. So that must have been quite a blow then. I mean, you've grown up with this as a Modigliani.
Yes, exactly. And I was determined then to find out and to prove that it really is by Modigliani.
And that's where we come in. So are there particular problems with trying to authenticate a Modigliani?
Yeah, because he's much faked, particularly his drawings. And you can see why, you know, the clarity and sort of formulaic way he draws is easily ripped off.
So if this is by Modigliani, which obviously you're fervently hoping it will be, Henrietta, what would it be worth?
So if it could be proved to be by Modigliani, I can see it being worth up to £100,000.
Were you expecting that?
No, not at all.
If it isn't by Modigliani, then?
A few £100. It's a decorative drawing.
It's a bit of a difference, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I'm hoping for the former.
So the question is, was your grandfather around at the right place, at the right time, to buy a genuine Modigliani, or has he ended up with a fake? The first step to answering this question is to take a closer look at the sketch. I'm using a halogen torch to see if any clues reveal themselves. This is so easily the sort of drawing that you could pass by without noticing. But the more you look into it, the more you're drawn into it. It's bewitching, it's fascinating up close. And I suppose what I find most affecting of all, and it's centred on the face, is the economy, is the ease with which so much poise and beauty is imparted just through a few simple strokes and lines. That exquisite aquiline shaped bone of the nose, and those almond eyes, just the tops of the lids. And then when you add that beautifully elongated neck and that tilt of the head, it finishes it off. That's that face that you would recognise in an artistic crowd. This is quintessential Modigliani. But the very thing that distinguishes this as a Modigliani face is its peril, because this is something that fakers copy. You know, you can imagine it's a reasonably straightforward job to do. It's quite formulaic, it's quite simple.
While Philip looks deeper into the drawing, I want to learn more about its history in Henrietta's family. The sketch's original owner, Henrietta's grandfather, Sir Sitwell, died in 1988, when she was just a child. But as a young man, he was an important figure in the history of British art and literature. He and his siblings, Edith and Osbert, were bright young things of the 1920s and 30s. But is there any record of them acquiring works by Modigliani?
So tell me a bit more about your grandfather. Did he have any direct connection to Modigliani?
Yes, he met Modigliani in Paris with his brother Osbert in 1918. He was given a letter of introduction and they went to his studio.
So he actually met him and presumably liked the work that he saw?
Yes, I think liked it so much that Sir Sitwell and his brother Osbert were offered the entire contents of Modigliani's studio shortly before he died for, I think, the sum of £1,000.
And what happened?
Well, unfortunately, they asked their father if he would lend them the money, but he refused.
Because that would have been, what, 1920, which is when Modigliani died.
Yes.
And they were going to buy the whole contents of his studio.
Yes, I know, and desperately sad, didn't manage to raise the funds.
So if Sir Sitwell and Osbert didn't succeed in buying a studio packed full of Modigliani's art, did they at least manage to acquire one genuine work by him? We need evidence, and on the back of the picture, I may have spotted our first potential leads. there are two inscriptions. A conservator who restored and reframed the picture in 1984 has written their name. They're no longer in business, but above, they've written a clue, possibly transcribed from the back of the original frame.
There's an address on the back of 2 Carlisle Square. Does that ring any bells for
Well,
you?
yes, number 2 Carlisle Square was where Sitwell and Osbert were living in the early 20s. So one might be led to believe that the picture was hanging there at some point.
I mean, this is quite, as provenance goes, this is not bad, Henrietta, I have to tell you. So you've got your grandfather who owned the picture, who knew Modigliani. I mean, that's pretty good going so far. We now, though, have to say not only that your grandfather knew Modigliani, but that this particular drawing was by the man himself.
Yes. It's exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
If we do manage to establish that this is by Modigliani, how do you feel about that?
Well, I'll be delighted, actually, for my grandfather, because it would prove that he had a great eye and that he had spotted a master at work, and that, you know, we weren't to know that Modigliani would become one of the greatest painters of the 20th century, but Sitwell spotted him as a young man, and I think it would be just lovely to know that he was right.
Despite Henrietta's hopes of proving her sketch genuine, there's no escaping the fact that Modigliani is a widely forged artist. The more time I spend with it, the more questions I have. There are a couple of aspects to this drawing which do slightly concern me. I've never seen this profile head of a child next to an adult like this, a double portrait. It's probably because I haven't seen enough works by the artist, but that's something that I need to assure myself of. And there's also another aspect, which is, well, I find it unsettling, and that is the forearm. It looks faltering, unfinished. I need to make sure that his drawings do include passages that might be a little bit rough compared to other elements. There's potentially a fascinating lead with this picture, and it's in the top left-hand corner, an inscription, and it says, "A Zoborowski," to Zoborowski. If we can work out who that is, it may well take us further to proving whether this is the real thing, real work by Modigliani, or not.
With our investigation up and running, I'm heading across London to the Courtauld Art Library. I need to find out about Modigliani's career as an artist, and crucially, whether Henrietta's sketch might fit into his body of work. Usually the best place to start is the catalogue raisonné, a comprehensive record of genuine works by an artist. In the case of Modigliani, there are several to choose from.
So it appears that since Modigliani's death in 1920, there have been not one, not two, but 5 separate catalogue raisonnés, lists of the artist's authenticated works.
The key question is there anything like Henrietta's drawing in any of them? It's clear to see Modigliani was a compulsive sketcher, dashing off pictures of his friends.
Going through these sketches, you feel you're getting much closer to Modigliani himself. The kind of life he was leading, who he was hanging out with, Pablo Picasso here in a portrait, Diego Rivera. I mean, these are the kind of artists that Modigliani was spending his time with, being influenced by. And then there's a name that keeps cropping up, Leopold Zabrowski. Look, here's an oil painting of him, here's a sketch of him. There are lots of them. And if you remember, Zabrowski is the name that Henrietta's drawing is dedicated to.
Looking further into Modigliani's biography, it turns out Leopold Zabrowski was an important figure in the artist's life. Zabrowski was a Polish poet and writer who moved to Paris in 1913 and became Modigliani's friend and, tantalizingly, his art dealer.
If Henrietta's drawing belonged to Zabrowski or passed through his hands on its way to Sir Sitwell, that would add extra significance to the work.
It's encouraging that Henrietta's sketch is similar in style to the works listed in these catalogues. But there's a problem. With so many Modigliani catalogues created over the years by different scholars, which one can we trust?
The earliest catalogue raisonné dates from 1929, the latest from just a few years ago. And the thing is, they don't seem to agree on much. One of them has about 300 genuine paintings listed, another 400. And that is one heck of a discrepancy.
What is clear is that when it comes to Modigliani scholarship, there have been some major problems.
Doing some research online, it's clear that some of these catalogue raisonné by various authors have been discredited over the years, including this one by Christian Parizeau. Now, there was a time when he was the go-to man if you wanted to authenticate Italian works of art. But in 2013, he was arrested and then convicted not only of faking, but also endorsing fake Modigliani paintings and drawings. So when it comes to his catalogue raisonné, I think we just have to rule it out.
With the catalogues proving unreliable or incomplete, I'm heading to France in search of known masterpieces by Modigliani. Just across the channel lies the city of Lille, a cultural hub of the north. Henrietta and I have come to the Museum of Modern Art. It holds a fantastic collection of Modigliani paintings, displayed alongside the African masks which so inspired him. We need to take a close look at some genuine Modigliani works. Can we see the same hand in these oil paintings as in Henrietta's pencil sketch?
This nude is the type of painting I think you could say he's most famous for. Perhaps one should say infamous. But actually, I haven't asked you what you think about Modigliani.
I have to say, honestly, I do really like his work, particularly his paintings. And I think there's something about the facial features, even though exaggerated, you know that these are real people.
You've touched upon a really interesting and important point. And I think it relates to your drawing as well. Get up close. There is a sense of the individual. There's a sort of manipulation of the features which suggests a distinct character. And I think that's also partly what got him into trouble. In 1917, he had an exhibition of nudes, his only one-artist exhibition. And two of them were seized by the police because they literally stopped the traffic. And I think it was partly because, yes, obviously nudes, but they could have been idealized. They weren't. There's always a person lurking beneath.
There's one painting we need to see which I hope will help progress our investigation. A mother and child captured by Modigliani. It's the same composition as Henrietta's sketch. Does her work show any stylistic similarities to this genuine painting?
This is everything that you really want in Modigliani. It's a monumental work, and I mean, I think it's an absolutely knockout painting.
Well, what I instantly recognise is that clunky curve arm, which I recognise from my drawing.
That arm is interesting, isn't it? It's a little bit clumsy, almost unresolved, yet the upper body of the picture, that exquisitely lit, mask-like face, and the rest is more polished and resolved. And you get that sort of slightly strange juxtaposition in your drawing, almost as if the artist, and let's hope it's Modigliani, has got a little bit bored on the bottom part.
He very much looks like he's working from top to bottom.
But above all with this painting, why I think it's so relevant to us is what it expresses emotionally, because this is not just a head. He's moving on to something a little bit more ambitious, an emotional relationship between a mother and a child.
Which I have in my drawing too, that connection, that intimacy between mother and child.
The stylistic similarities may be compelling, but back in the UK, I need to hunt down some concrete provenance. The family story is that the sketch was bought by Sitwells after World War I. but so far, we've no physical proof of that. I've come to Northamptonshire to see Henrietta's mum, Susanna.
Oh, hello. Please come in. Lovely to meet you. It's very nice to meet you. Thank you.
She's letting me delve into the family archives to see if I can find any record of the picture having been bought by Henrietta's grandfather.
Let's have a look in here. So the earlier the record is, the better. If I can prove, with the help of all this, that Sir Cheverel owned this picture back in the 40s, the 30s, even as far back as the 20s, even better, that will fill a huge gap in its history and make the chance of it being a forgery much less likely.
But with a family like the Sitwells, there's an unusual issue.
When we're looking through a family archive on fake or fortune, the problem is usually there's not enough of it. But I mean, look at all of this. The Sitwells were a family who had a real sense of their place in history. And as far as I can see, they documented, kept pretty much every cutting, every newspaper article that was ever written about them. And there were a lot. Thing is, though, in amongst all of this, am I going to find the one piece of information that is going to prove our picture? It's a bit like looking for a needle in a haystack.
The best lead we have so far is 2 Carlisle Square, the address transcribed on the back of the frame. This was where Sir Cheverel lived with his brother Osbert after World War I, when he was supposed to have bought the work. Rather wonderfully, the interior of Carlisle Square was photographed for Homes and Gardens magazine in 1936. I can see the walls are filled with the Sitwells' impressive collection of art. I'm trying to spot Henrietta's sketch, but can't see it anywhere. An even more intriguing image, dating further back to the early 1920s, is this oil painting, which depicts the drawing room. Could this be Henrietta's sketch hanging in 2 Carlisle Square? Frustratingly, it's just too insubstantial to be sure.
With that mountain of family archive in those 2 trunks, I was sure we'd find some kind of smoking gun. But no documentary evidence, no photographic proof, nothing.
The lack of hard evidence is troubling. Perhaps an auction house had good reason to be nervous about Henrietta's sketch. We're in shark-infested waters. Back in London, I've been doing some research into Modigliani forgeries, and there's more disturbing news.
Experts believe there are something like 1,000 fake Modiglianis in circulation at the moment. Imagine. And in 2017, there was a high-profile exhibition in Genoa. 100,000 people came to see the Modiglianis. 20 of the 21 on display were deemed to be fake. The police came, they raided the exhibition, seized the works, and destroyed the fakes.
There have been a number of known Modigliani forgers over the years. One of the most notorious was the Hungarian-born faker Elmir Dahori. In the years after World War II, after struggling as an artist in his own right, he turned to forgery. He sold hundreds of fakes to collectors all over the world, including supposed Modiglianis, before finally being exposed in the 1960s. With so many Dahori fakes in circulation, is there a risk Henrietta's sketch could be one of them? I've contacted a man in America who knew Dahori better than most, his secretary and biographer, the brilliantly named Mark Forgy. I'm hoping he can shine a light on Henrietta's sketch.
Mark, very nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All the way from Minneapolis. Let's just talk about Elmir Dahori. So when did you know him? When were you working with him?
I met Elmir in the fall of 1969. I ended up working for Elmir and living with him for 8 years, from 1969 until his death in 1976.
And can I ask you, did you see him do any Modigliani forgeries in that time?
I did. I was present when a friend of Elmir's asked him if he could do a small drawing. This person needed some financial assistants. Elmire did a small Modigliani drawing, gave it to her, but didn't sign it. And she then, later on, we found out, sold it as an original Modigliani drawing.
Whoa. So that is out there as an original?
Yes.
And that, I don't want to put you on the spot here, Mark, but that is a crime. I mean, there he was doing a fake Modigliani for a friend to then sell on who was harder cash.
You have to understand the contextual circumstances. When I met Elmire, this was in the late 60s. We championed rebels at that time. So I saw Elmire not as a criminal, but kind of a folk hero, thumbing his nose at the art establishment.
But it's still fraud, Mark, however you dress it up.
Yes, it's fraud with a flair.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. But nonetheless, he faked many, many Modiglianis. The $64,000 question is, Henrietta's picture, do you think that is by Elmire de Hory?
I don't see it as a product of Elmire's hand.
Well, that is a relief,
But
I have to say.
But what I find problematic about the drawing, there are a number of red flags that I see. It is not a very accomplished drawing. When you look at the paper-thin profile of the young girl, she has this full frontal eye when she's in full profile. It is so out of place and uncharacteristic. I don't think you'll find anything like that if you look at Modigliani's oeuvre. It's just so improbable.
Right. Not good enough to be by de Hory. I mean, that's something.
With forgers like de Hory polluting the market, we need to subject Henrietta's sketch to a forensic examination. If genuine, it should be over 100 years old. Could science help prove this? To find out, I brought the drawing to Nicholas Burnett, one of the country's leading conservators for works on paper.
Hello, Nicholas.
Hello, Philip.
So, here it is.
Interesting. So, shall we unframe it?
Yes, please.
Henrietta's sketch hasn't been taken out of its frame for nearly 4 decades, since it was restored and reframed in 1984. As Nicholas carefully removes the backboard, will we find something on the back of the picture which could help us?
So, are we at the point of a revelation?
Yes.
Oh, nothing there. Completely blank. Not even a rogue pencil mark.
Despite the lack of clues, I can see that the sketch has been backed onto a piece of Japanese paper, a kind of tissue used to conserve fragile works. Now we have the picture out of the frame, Nicholas wants to check for optical brightening agents. These were only added to paper after World War II, so they shouldn't appear in a sketch by Modigliani, who died in 1920. To see them, we need to examine the sketch under ultraviolet light.
So I've got a modern sheet of paper here that has optical brightening agents in. Okay, so we'll look at that and we'll see how this one reacts. Now, to protect your eyes, thank you. And here we go.
So you're going to pass the beam over it?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's highly distinctive, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, it's properly glowing in the dark.
literally.
Yeah.
Now for the drawing.
So if this is to be an early piece of paper of the right sort of date, we don't want it to glow in the dark.
Yeah, that's it. Wow, that's a good sign.
It's mercifully dull.
Yes, yes. You put the two alongside each other, it's like chalk and cheese.
They couldn't be more distinctly different.
No.
So then this at least proves that the paper that is being used for this drawing is old.
Yes, it proves that it's not a really bad modern forgery.
This is reassuring. And with the lights back on, my eye is drawn to one detail I hadn't seen before.
Now that's interesting. 2 lines of stain around the edge where the paper at various times has faded in the light, suggesting, therefore, that before the present framing or mounting, this has been done twice before that.
Yes.
And that would cover a long period of time. I mean, why not a century?
Quite possibly they don't form overnight. They take years to form. There's one other interesting thing. This edge is perforated like the edge of a stamp.
Oh, that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. It's been torn from, I would think, a sketchbook. So we can measure the spacing of the perforations, and if we can compare that to other known drawings by Modigliani, that'd be quite useful evidence.
Nicholas measures the height, width and thickness of the drawing.
1 dot, 1 line, down the centre.
Then one final vital statistic: the number of perforations per inch along the torn edge.
So that's 11.3, give or take.
So you can reduce these serrations to a number, 11.3, and that 11.3 might match up with another 11.3 that could take us closer to Modigliani.
That would be lovely, yeah.
We now know Henrietta's drawing has been torn from a sketchbook. Could it have been ripped from Modigliani's? Back at the gallery, I've managed to locate a rare gem, a completely intact sketchbook which once belonged to the artist.
This is a sketchbook in the Pompidou Centre in Paris, done about 1916. It is full of original, totally accepted works by the great Modigliani. And immediately you can see that there are, I think, stylistic comparisons with Henrietta's. Look at the face here, the concentration on the detail. It almost falls away beneath in that lumpy, stumpy way. I mean, these drawings really are delightful. He's catching life on the move around him in cafes or whatever, a bit like you might with a smartphone, taking images of friends. This is a Picasso.
And actually, look at that eye and look at that nose. To me, that bears a resemblance to Henrietta's picture. And also, Mark Forgy said you would never see a Modigliani profile with those vacant almond eyes. But look, it's not quite a profile, it's 3/4, but it's near as damn it.
But it's not just the stylistic comparison, which I think is potentially exciting. There's the physical as well. If you look carefully, of course, you can see perforations, this sort of serrated edge. Now, imagine if we can prove that the perforation measurement of Henrietta's is the same as that in the drawings at the Pompidou Centre.
Amazing. And what about the size of the paper itself? Is Henrietta's the same as the one in the Pompidou?
Well, that's a really interesting point, because we have, down to the last millimetre or half millimetre, the dimensions of Henrietta's, 430.5, 264. What we need to do is go to the Pompidou Centre, put them together, see if they're the same.
But then there's one thing I want to look at as well, which is the dedication in the top left to Zborowski. That must be Leopold Zborowski, who is Modigliani's dealer. I can't think who else it would be. And then the question arises, why would Sir Sitwell have a sketch that was dedicated to someone else? Why would it not be kept by Zborowski himself?
Our investigation has raised some crucial questions. I'm hoping we can find the answers back in France. I've come to Paris. Armed with Henrietta's sketch, I'm heading to the Pompidou Centre, which holds one of the world's leading collections of modern art. Anne Montfort-Tanguy is head of the drawings collection. She's agreed to give me special access to Modigliani's personal sketchbook. I'm keen to see how Henrietta's drawing compares to this treasure trove of genuine works.
This is a sketchbook we bought in 1964, owned by Jeanne Hébuterne, the last companion of Modigliani, so we are sure of its provenance.
So it's come from the family of his common law wife?
Yes.
So you can't really get a better provenance than that?
No.
With such strong pedigree, we can be certain the drawings in this sketchbook are genuine. The stylistic similarities are compelling. Modigliani's drawings are beautifully, rapidly composed and often incomplete, just like Henrietta's sketch. But crucially, how does the paper measure up?
The first thing I'd love to be able to establish is whether the paper on ours is the same dimensions as a sketchbook like this, because having a sketch from a sketchbook and a sketchbook together is rather tempting in terms of a comparison, is it not?
Could Henrietta's sketch be drawn on the same kind of paper Modigliani used?
It's exactly the same size.
Exactly the same size. That's a wonderful fit. So we can assume that if our drawing is by Modigliani, he was using a similar, if not almost identical sketchbook.
Yes.
To the one that you have.
Yes. And the quality of paper also makes us believe that it is exactly the same.
Now for the most important comparison. Do the serrations along the torn edges match? Nicholas has kindly lent me his perforation guide. If we get the same reading of 11.3, then we can say that Henrietta's sketch comes from exactly the same kind of sketchbook that Modigliani used.
11.3.
Yes.
We have a match.
Perfect.
A matching perforated edge. Such a small detail, but one that will greatly strengthen our case.
We're dealing with the same design of paper taken from an almost identical book. The right proportions, the right colour, given the fading. I feel rather excited, actually.
While Philip has made a huge step forward, across Paris, Henrietta has joined me to try and nail the provenance. We need to find out how her grandfather might have acquired a sketch bearing the name of Modigliani's art dealer, Zabrowski. The family know Sitwell came here to meet Modigliani in 1918. His journey would have taken him along these streets, through one of the most bohemian quarters of Paris. So Henrietta, we're in Montparnasse, in the south of Paris, and this rather unremarkable little street, Cité Falguière it's called, in between World War I and World War II, was the focus of a great outpouring of creative talent. Artists from all over the world came here for the cheap rents and the company of like-minded souls. And the names that we're creating here are the greats to this day. So Degas, Dali, Giacometti, and most importantly of all,
Our man.
our man, Modigliani, exactly.
Right here in this space.
In this
area.
space. And it's only this studio at the end now that is still in use.
Right.
Atelier 11, Studio 11 it's called. And this is pretty much as it was back then. This was where Modigliani would often work. It was the studio of his friend and fellow artist, Chaim Soutine. Life was pretty desperate for these two struggling artists. Now, it all looks quite bohemian now, Henrietta. Imagine what it was like in Modigliani's day. No running water, no heating, infestations of lice. Pretty squalid, really.
Yes.
Let me read you an extract from this biography of Modigliani, which just gives you an idea of what it was like. It's talking about a couple of people walking past the Cité Falguière, so this street here. Near the door, he found Modigliani and Soutine, his friend, Chaim Soutine, lying next to each other on mattresses, with water splashed all around their little island to discourage the bedbugs.
Oh, yes, that's a very real picture, isn't it? Of
So it's
literally just on the floor there.
Yeah, so it was pretty squalid in those days. There was one person who would become Modigliani's saviour. Leopold Zabrowski, the name on Henrietta's sketch. I've been digging into their relationship, and I found that Zabrowski put Modigliani up in his own home and gave him the 2 largest rooms to work in. He clearly utterly believed in his talent, and he would walk the streets of Paris, dragging people into studios like this to look at Modigliani's work, to try to sell it. He'd have to show it by candlelight, because more often than not, the electricity was cut off. But he was determined that others would see what he saw.
I've never seen pictures of him before, so this is a real treat, actually.
The close relationship between Modigliani and Zabrowski could explain why the sketch is dedicated to him. A gift, perhaps, from a grateful artist. We're building up a picture of possible provenance. We now need to work out how the sketch might have passed from Zabrowski to Henrietta's grandfather. Could it be when Sitwell visited Modigliani in his studio? It's likely Zabrowski would have been there too.
The story's starting to come alive for me now, actually. I'm starting to imagine how it might have been produced, where it was produced, and the connections with my grandfather, Sitwell. And it just makes me even start to wonder whether my grandfather was in this space with Zabrowski and with Modigliani. I'm wondering if he'd actually walked through these very doors.
We're leaving Paris with compelling, if circumstantial, provenance. We still need to search for something more concrete. Back in London, I'm catching up with Philip at the gallery. I've been delving into the written works of the Sitwells, and I've found some thrilling first-hand evidence.
Take a look at this cover of a book by Sir Osbert Sitwell, Laughed in the Next Room. And this is a book he wrote, an autobiography from World War I to the 1920s. And in it, he talks about a trip he made to Biarritz. And he refers to his brother Sitwell having been to Paris just before coming to Biarritz.
He had been especially impressed by the work of Picasso and of Modigliani, and had made arrangements for an exhibition in London the following summer by the various modern masters of Paris.
So, Sitwell's trip inspired him to show the work of Modigliani to the British public for the very first time. And there's a tantalising quote.
He had also purchased a fine drawing by Modigliani and brought this with him.
So there we have the first written evidence that Sitwell bought a Modigliani drawing. There's more. This is a book by Sitwell himself, For Want of the Golden City, and it's a rather extraordinary tome ranging across a whole variety of subjects: biography, architecture, art history, and a rather unexpected and in-depth discussion about professional wrestling on television.
Those brothers wrote about anything that moved.
They did. Now here you've got Sitwell talking about his trip to Paris before he went to Biarritz. He'd bought several drawings from Modigliani for £1 a piece. I mean, imagine that these days. Which drawings were later, and not by myself, packed as wrappings for my shoes in the hotel at Biarritz.
No!
But what this does show us is that Sitwell bought Modigliani drawings. This is him saying it in his own words. I mean, what's happened to these drawings is lost in the mist of time.
This is a hugely promising step. We can now say for certain that Henrietta's grandfather bought drawings by Modigliani. But without any descriptions that point to her sketch, will this be enough to persuade the authority on the artist? Across London, we're trying to piece together the story of the exhibition Henrietta's grandfather staged. We found that in 1919, Sitwell and his brother Osbert organised an exhibition of modern French art at a gallery in Heels, the London department store. This featured works by some of Paris's most exciting young artists, including Modigliani. The other person responsible for setting up this exhibition was none other than Modigliani's art dealer, Zabrowski. Now we have a proven link between Sitwell and the name on the sketch. The staff at Heels have agreed to help us recreate the exhibition. they've hung the gallery walls with reproductions of the Modigliani works displayed for sale over a century ago. I'm hoping we can discover whether Henrietta's sketch was one of them.
So, Henrietta, these on the wall were the type of paintings that shocked and excited London society, thanks to the work of your ancestors. And I've got to ask you, what does it feel like to be the granddaughter of the man who had such an impact?
I feel thrilled to be here amongst the sorts of paintings that Sacheverell, or Sachi as I knew him, brought to London for the first time is, I mean, you've really amazed me.
Well, we couldn't get the real things because frankly, we'd be looking at about £1 billion worth of Modigliani on the walls here. I mean, it really divided society. I mean, the Times described these things, thanks to your grandfather, as ghastly. But others just thought, whoa, this is the beginning of something new and thrilling. So it was such a bold manoeuvre.
I've been doing some digging, and in the Courtauld Institute archives, I've discovered something which could provide crucial evidence.
So it might not look much, but what I'm holding here, Henrietta, is an artistic lightning bolt. Your grandfather's exhibition.
Gosh, I mean, at first glance, it just looks like a sort of boring old manual, doesn't it? But I can see it says Catalogue of Exhibition of French Art, 1914 to 1919. So this is it.
Now, let me just turn the pages. You've got major artists like Derain and Matisse.
Picasso, Modigliani, there we are.
But it's the last page I want you to cast your eyes over. Have a look at this.
In 4 portfolios, drawings, 50 by Modigliani.
50 drawings. And we know that they were offered in a portfolio for about £1 a piece. We also know that quite a few were left over. And what we have here are scans, replicas of the type of drawings that we think were in the exhibition.
Yes, look.
Just imagine, you wanted to come away like a sort of party bag from the exhibition. You want to come away with something. You could have picked up one of these.
Souvenir, yes.
One of these little priceless objects.
What a bargain. Oh, and look. I recognise that.
Okay. All right then. So we've popped your drawing in there because it really isn't impossible that your drawing was part of this group.
An account of the exhibition states that many of these drawings were left unsold. It's not hard to imagine how Henrietta's sketch might have made its way into Sacheverell's hands.
You know, I think I'm feeling now that this is exactly the sort of provenance that this might have if it is by the master. Why not one of those that was at this exhibition, in this gallery?
It's a thrilling thought, actually, yeah.
The circumstantial evidence is stacking up. But if we're to convince the authority on the artist, we're going to need more concrete proof. One final clue we need to address is the signature. Is this by the hand of Modigliani or a forger? To find out, I've sent it to one of the country's leading forensic handwriting experts, Adam Brandt. He's been comparing the signature on Henrietta's work to known Modigliani sketches, but he's found the task isn't straightforward.
There are certain problems in the sense that when you compare this with the known signatures of Modigliani, the comparison isn't exact.
Adam has been looking at the baseline, an imaginary line which runs along the bottom of the letters.
If you look at the baseline,
Yes.
and you compare that with the known signatures, it's very different. Some drop down from G to L, some bounce up at I, and so on.
It's erratic, unpredictable.
Absolutely.
With the signature on Henrietta's sketch, the baseline is relatively smooth, but in genuine Modigliani signatures, there's a huge variation, making comparison almost impossible.
There isn't much consistency that one can say, look, this is what we have to compare. It's not crystal clear. Okay?
Because Modigliani seems
to be a bit all over the place.
Yes, but where I am starting to feel happier about this is when you move to the issue of pen lifts. When people are writing quite quickly, they don't realise that they are lifting the pen. If you look at the way that he takes the pen off the paper at the top of the D, off the paper at the bottom of the I, and he takes it off the paper to reach up to make that A, amongst the known signatures, you see something similar. There's a nice consistency here. So for the first time, this critical area of unconscious movement of lifting a pen starts to be similar.
This is much more encouraging. When signing his name, Modigliani was consistent in when he took his pen off the page, at the D, the I, and just before the A. We see the same pattern in our signature. Would it even occur to a forger to replicate such a subtle characteristic? Sir Adam, do you think that this writing is by Modigliani?
Yes, it probably is.
Is there a sort of gap, a space between probably and yes?
Well, in this industry, we use the word probably, so I will stick with the word probably, but I'm, probably this is the case that this signature was written by Modigliani.
With Adam's final piece of the puzzle in place, we've done all that we can.
The day has come to find out if Henrietta's sketch is a genuine work by the great Modigliani. I think we've made a really good case for Henrietta's sketch. We know that Sitwell met Modigliani. He bought several of his drawings. He even put on an exhibition of Modigliani at Heels in London in 1919. There were 50 sketches, many left unsold. It's possible that Sitwell held on to some of them. One of them could have been Henrietta's. There is something that bothers me, though, is given how extensively the Sitwells wrote about every tiny detail of their lives, why is there no reference to Sitwell and this particular sketch?
Stylistically, this matches the work of Modigliani, both in terms of subject matter, but also technique. The inscription, the signature, are bang on in many ways. The paper exactly matches that found in a sketchbook by Modigliani in the Pompidou Centre. But set against all of that are these dark waters. You know, we are in an area of the art world that's awash with duplicity and fakery. And if I were the person who had to adjudicate yes or no, would I want to stick my neck out and say whether this is by Modigliani? Now is the moment. We've invited Dr. Kenneth Wayne, one of the world's leading Modigliani authorities, to the gallery. He's regularly called on as an expert by leading auction houses and is currently overseeing a new Modigliani catalogue raisonné. Dr. Wayne is undertaking a thorough examination of Henrietta's sketch and our dossier of evidence. Have we done enough to convince him that the drawing is genuine?
Modigliani was so hard up, he once sold drawings for £1 a sheet. His wild life and early demise meant his legend grew quickly. Today, he's risen to become the tragic rock star of modern art, with collectors vying to own works that still feel dazzlingly vibrant a century later. If authentic, Henrietta's sketch could be worth up to £100,000. If it's a fake, it's only a few hundred. Henrietta is on her way to the gallery, and we're all about to discover whether her drawing is a genuine work by Amedeo Modigliani.
Dr. Wayne, thank you so much for coming here.
Yes.
We'd be very grateful if you could air your thoughts on this.
Sure. With Modigliani, fakes and forgeries are a big issue. In a sense, that's a testament to his popularity. This drawing is a little atypical in that most of his drawings and his paintings are of single figures. This one is 2 figures. It's dedicated to Swarovski, which makes sense because not only was he Modigliani's dealer in 1919, He also was involved directly with this specific exhibition. So there's a connection between Swarovski, the Sitwells, Modigliani.
Given all that, what is your conclusion when it comes to Henrietta's picture?
Well, in the United States, we have a rude expression when we're evaluating things: does it pass the smell test? And in this case, we don't have proof, but it is highly probable that it was shown in the exhibition in 1919 and then came down through the family. I would say that this work passes the smell test.
Okay.
It feels right, it smells right.
Well, that sounds like a fragrant outcome.
Exactly.
Yes.
I think that sounds like a yes, Henrietta. That's a yes.
The smell is right. So,
It is. So how do you feel about it now? Now it's actually got the name Modigliani attached to it.
well, I actually lost for words for once. No, I'm very excited, and I think it's exciting because it puts my grandfather back in that sort of, it's proof that he was able to make extraordinary discoveries at such a young age, and and to think of such a young man bringing art over with Swarovski like that to put on for the British public. I think if I look back to myself in my 20s, I certainly wasn't finding impressive young artists.
Yeah, and in the same way that you've connected with your grandfather, I feel I've really got to know Modigliani more and just how he works and how he thinks. I feel I know the man better. And there's just one other thought that might be worth carrying with us. The curator of the Pompidou Centre has suggested that there's a possibility, on the grounds of comparison, that the subject of the little girl could be the same as one that was painted in oil by Modigliani in 1918 called Little Girl with Plaits.
I feel rather emotional. Sorry. I think as a mother of two young girls, you see a young girl.
And whether we'll ever get the full evidence for this, who knows?
So what's going through your mind, Henrietta? Because I didn't expect that reaction.
No, I didn't think I expected it either, but I think because it's connected to my family, it is more emotional, and it makes you think about family members and about things that might have happened in one's own family that are sort of brought to the fore again. You don't have a chance very often to dig into your own history. You're sort of so busy with your own lives that you don't look back, and when you do, it's quite powerful, actually.
It's become a document, has it not?
Yeah.
The document of proof of what your amazing grandfather achieved.